lithium would be part. I think the opening question is, what lessons have we failed to learn from regular extractives that if we don't apply to this energy transition minerals, we would regret?
The first thing to learn is always to remember that these are non-renewable resources, and therefore the way we exploit them should generate as much value as possible, not only for the current generation, but for future generations. As much value as possible beyond revenue, but also the wider development of the economy. This is the lesson to learn from every country which has exploited its mineral resources for the advancement of their people and also the transformation of their economies.
That means that the fixation with fiscal regimes is either misguided or overrated.
Fiscal regimes are extremely important because at least on the raw mineral, you make sure that you get a return, because the other forms of value require additional investment. So as the owner of the resource, when it comes out of the ground, generally the country should get a share. The royalty is not based on profit or anything. It is that you've taken out X amount of mineral from the ground, give us X percent of it. And the reason why the lithium thing, if you remember, there was such a discussion about it, goes to the issue of critical minerals. Critical minerals are the minerals which have come into prominence and importance because of their role in generating renewable energy and allowing us to cut emissions from the burning of fossil fuels, and therefore would allow us to undertake the transition from dependence on fossil fuel to alternative renewable energy. So because of that, of course, they become very important and they become points of contestation. So lithium in Ghana has got that importance globally. And the thing about the royalty rate, therefore, is that with that premium on lithium, it is possible to also get a premium on the royalty that you collect on it. And this is not unique to Ghana. Other countries define regimes which seek to get a premium, or they consider to be the minerals that it is possible to get a premium on the royalty.
The agreement with the Atlantic Lithium and its local subsidiary seems to have stalled. October 2023 was when the initial agreement was contemplated. For some parliamentary reasons, they couldn't sign. At the time, the opposition said that the 10% royalty rate was too high, and they also felt that we needed to lock in joint ventureships and possibly a local entity that can add value. A year and a half later, that party is in government, and they're telling us that the 10% is illegal, and we're not even sure if there's any commitment to setting up a JV or local processing. How did we get here?
Well, I think we got here also because really there was a rush to develop an agreement for one company rather than to take time to develop a methodical long-term framework for how we are going to utilize our critical minerals. And don't forget that lithium is not the only critical mineral that we have in Ghana. We've been mining manganese for more than 100 years. This is one of the battery minerals. We've been mining bauxite for more than 80 years. Bauxite is aluminum is also listed as a critical mineral. So we have a number of them. And as we are sitting here, the Ghanaian public do not know the critical mineral policy that was announced by the last government. It is clear that that process was not completed, and yet there was a hurry to grant a lease to one company. I have no doubt that the hurry to grant the lease was driven by two related factors. Mineral policy in Ghana is still dominated by the prioritization of revenue. Secondly, as is often the case with agreements in this country, there were pressures, lobbies, that we need to get this thing out of the door, so the project can go on, we'll get revenue, it will signal to potential investors and so on. So there was not a comprehensive framework for this. Okay? So I can see how we arrived there. So the first thing is the absence of a fully thought through policy. And secondly, the rush with a particular contract, concession outside the context of a more thought through.
So are you saying we require a critical earth mineral or critical minerals policy as different from a mining policy?
Yes, because actually you can have a mining policy which governs the exploitation of minerals and of concessions granting and so on. But the use of minerals usually is not a mineral policy issue, but it's actually maybe an industrial policy issue, which is connected to how does trade policy affect your ability to invest in value addition, what skills do we need to be able to control. So there are a range of sectoral things which affect how you benefit from your minerals. But there's a core mining sector issue which has to do with your regime around how you exploit your minerals as minerals. So, and in some cases also, therefore, you have a special regime for minerals. So if you look in the Minerals and Mining Act, for example, they have carved out something like uranium as a mineral to be given a particular regime. When under Akufo-Addo, manganese and bauxite were taken out of the purview of the normal operation of the Minerals and Mining Act, and integrated companies were created. Okay, those are examples. More recently, the government handed over the whole, Akufo-Addo's government handed the whole of the Songo Lagoon to one company, controversially, but with the justification that will help set up a salt entity. So having a particular policy for a mineral or a subsector is not unique. So we are talking therefore about the clarity of the purpose and the instruments that you bring to bear on it.
So if we are to move away from a fixation with just royalties and fiscal regimes, I think there are two big issues. The issue of local value addition, even possibly the structure of ownership of the exploiting entity, and then local value addition. As a leading think tank in the extractives, have you had the chance to review what this new government is contemplating with this company?
I think just to make a simple and direct answer, the controversy about the royalty, we need to go back to what the law says. Just focus on the mining. Some years ago, the law had provision. This thing has evolved with time. Early on, we had a sliding scale from, I think, 3 to 12. So a depending percent. So depending on the mineral or the market conditions, this thing moved. It was reduced. And then it got fixed at 5%. That 5% was then taken out. The provision was taken out of the act, and was put in there that the royalty rate will be fixed by the minister from time to time.
So this is a 2015 amendment of the law?
Yes, thereabouts. Yeah. From time to time. Now, with that amendment, it meant that instead of there being, to give flexibility for quick response, because you don't have to change the whole legislation. So the idea is that the legislative instruments will be used to announce rates. But the impression was that there will be a single rate at any time or multiple rates, but it has to be legislated. I don't think it should be interpreted as laying the basis for rates in individual contracts, because this is something that there's an attempt to move away from, to allow, patronage, manipulation of rates for benefit of individual entities. So so Goldfields, for example, was given a sliding rate of 3 to 5%, which we questioned as illegal, because this was not fixed for every body. So if 5% was the operating rate, and you give a company 10%, or you desire to give a company 10% royalty rate, you need to go through the legal processes and have it in the legislative instrument. I don't think that the root of an individual contract having that rate in it is correct. But however, it's become a justification, that legalism has become a justification for what is an economic choice. Because this is a government which controls parliament. All he has to do is to pass a more broad-based legislation which allows that 10% rate.
That's if they really want us to get 10%.
Yes,
because this is being presented as though the previous government signed 10% is illegal. So you are reverting to what is legal.
Yeah, so if you,
without thinking about what does Ghana get anyway.
If it's
and whose corner are you in?
If it's legality,
yes,
it is very simple to take the.
And the question is, whose law has been broken? So for me, the majority's attempt
is a diversion.
It's a red herring.
It's a diversion.
So, which is, and by the way, you've also said that we shouldn't overfixate on the royalty.
Yes.
Because you can give me
royalties are not important.
But if you can give me a 20% royalty and take everything else, and give me a 5% royalty and have other things. So my question is legitimate that, or it's the same question that, have we looked at the other issues around, say, for example, a local joint ventureship, a local entity that does processing? Should we not look at the agreement holistically? Royalty, value addition, ownership, and then be able to say, this is the best deal for Ghana.
Absolutely. But you see, the headline announcement was that there will be processing. But what they agreed with the company was that they will do a feasibility for whether processing will be possible. But in the meantime, they had already signed an off-taker agreement with a company in the US, which meant that there was a presumption that they will be able to export the mineral.
And so, this off-taker is basically importing it from us unprocessed.
Yes. So different messages. So there are political messages going out, and then there are economic relationships being set, with the company. So, but I think the coming back to the thing about having a holistic framework. I mean, there are a number of factors which go into this holistic thing. I mean, it is not every single deposit of a mineral that you exploit that you will be able to set up, say, an integrated process for, because the reserves may not be enough to support the investment for processing. So you may decide that maybe the best way to get additional value for that is how the supplies needed by the mine and its work, you strengthen the backward linkages. So the supplies to the mine, the procurement by the mine, for example, you can strengthen how the local content of that procurement as a way of integrating it with your economy. So there are different ways of getting more value than royalty from your mineral deposits through building linkages, a variety of linkages. You can even build the linkage by becoming a world-famous, having a world-famous R&D facility, research and development facility around that mineral and its possibilities. Okay?
Well, let me just tell you what the company has said. So, Ahmed Salim Adam, general manager of the company that we've entered the lease agreement with, has said that the company concluded and submitted the results of a feasibility study on setting up a processing plant in Ghana, and that it did not make domestic processing explicitly mandatory. They found that the plant commercially was not viable, citing the absence of a local value chain, inadequate infrastructure, and the limited production volumes expected from Atlantic Ewoya mine. These were the three reasons. And he said we would need about 3 Ewoya mines to make local value addition feasible.
Yes.
Unquote.
Yeah, I mean, it could be true. But the point to make, however, you see, is that what if we take that, it goes back to the point I'm making about the need for a comprehensive conception. Because you see, it's great to want to add value, but take our energy situation, for example. Energy is key. Okay, so you must have energy of a certain quality and other things which make the next stage possible. I mean, we had a presentation in this meeting here talking about our experiences. And one of the things that was said was China, for example, where they got to with their mineral processing, there was a 40-year horizon within which they got from where they started to where they are. I mean, China, of course, had some history before, but it's a good example of the long-termism. Because Indonesia has had an experience of also moving in a particular way. But you need to get all those bits and pieces in place. It's not enough to have an aspiration. The aspiration must be backed by a plan, okay? And the starting point, of course, is the volume and quality of your deposit.
What about the argument that if we want to develop an integrated lithium processing, we will need at least 2 or 3 more companies to come in. And the best way to attract them is for the work at Awoya to begin. It's been 2 years. So even if you're giving them very generous terms, if that attracts others to come in, the conditions for setting up the integrated lithium processing could happen, right? As we speak, at the time the agreement was initially contemplated, the price of lithium was excess of $2,000. It's now around $1,300. So clearly, we have lost some time. So there's an argument that we need to hasten, bring the first one in, prove the concept, and then over the long or medium term, this holistic thing you are contemplating can happen.
Well, yes and no. Because what we have experienced in many places, and also in Ghana here, if you give A certain terms, B will certainly say, I want those terms also. So the terms that we give to the first person must be clearly related to our ambitions, okay? And also, if you have only one mind, it makes sense to make sure you are optimizing your revenue from the royalties, okay? And your plan then allows you to evolve the thing. It brings him back to the point of how this first mind thing was not properly thought through and properly negotiated, which has led to this problem. The other thing is that if you took a slightly regional lens on the thing, Nigeria is producing lithium. There are processes where Chinese are about to set up plants there. I mean, too often, things for which we could be thinking regionally, we're constantly thinking nationally. So your ability to even attract capital for processing may be enhanced if you are sure that you have a wider base for your process. So the DRC, Democratic Republic in Congo, and Zambia, for example, they share borders. They have cobalt, they have copper. They have come together to have a development plan for how they work together to add value to their cobalt and their copper. Okay, they've chosen not to compete, but to harness the possibilities of scale and cooperation. So there are many pathways, but the starting point is how thoroughly have you thought about what you are doing and the pathways that you want to.
My goal for coming here,
and that applies also to how we're approaching the manganese, we're approaching the bauxite, because GUIDEC has been going round and round and round with claims about an integrated aluminum industry. We are
not seeing. My goal for coming here was to see case studies of specific countries and how they are handling aspects of their critical mineral value chains. So you mentioned, for example, DRC, where there's a Center for Excellence for Batteries. I'll be speaking to Professor Kalele about this. South Africa as well, an organization called AfriVolt, speaking to them as well. It would be interesting to talk to somebody from outside Africa, because I heard the Indonesian Prime Minister talking about what they wanted to do with tin and manganese. And this was in a Western country, saying that they decided to ban the raw export of those products because they felt that the value addition imperative was now or never. So I'm going to sort of go into those, but I just wanted your final take on what should happen in Ghana now. All right? What should civil society and the public be demanding for? Because this government has a super majority. They seem to be saying that we will renegotiate the deal, but we are not very sure if it's based on a developmental state model or a crony capitalism agenda. So I'm not really sure what the public should be asking their MPs in relation to this lithium deal.
Yeah. Immediately on the royalty, I think they should not kid us. That's a legality issue. They can use the law to maintain the 10%. 2, across the continent, there's a consensus, including even from the last government, that we should move away from exporting raw minerals to having mechanisms that use minerals as a basis for industrialization, value addition, job creation, and so on and so forth, which is about building, linkages backwards and forward. I think that agenda should be the basis of how we go forward around the lithium. It may have regional dimensions, but we have to go forward that. And that also requires, therefore, that in this moment when there's a lot of interest in critical minerals, we take a deep breath and develop a proper strategy for the exploitation of Ghana's critical minerals. Because late last year, an African framework, the African Green Mineral Strategy, was developed, which is pointing to some of the ways in which countries can work together.
All right.
If you look at what some countries have developed for themselves, the quality and depth of work which has gone into it, it lays the basis not only for your mineral policy, for your mineral, but how minerals can contribute to an economic-wide transformation, which is why our conference is around this issue of how the energy transition, which requires the use of critical minerals, is also an opportunity for advancing Africa's structural economic transformation. And that really, in a microcosm, is what the Ghana project around critical minerals should also be about.
And we're coming to you from the sidelines of the first meeting of this international consultation on energy transition, critical minerals, and structural economic transformation. When we come back, we'll breeze through 3 case studies: South Africa,